Welcome to episode 69. Nice.
Nice.
Nice. Of the Two Bad Stack podcast. Glad to be back here, guys. I'm your host, Ace. Alongside me today, we have Burge back in the seat. How's it going, buddy?
What's up? It's good to be back. I wish the Bruins were better than they are currently in the
Yeah.
NHL standings, but nonetheless, we're gonna have some fun tonight.
Yeah, what better for a nice episode than a little trade deadline primer? The deadline's Friday, guys.
Hard to
Gotta figure
believe.
out. I know, time's flied. Flown's the what is the appropriate word there, Burge?
Time has flown by.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Time has indeed flown by. That was weird. All right, there we go. I'm back. Sorry, my camera was acting up there. Anyways, so we're still live here. Happy to talk a little bit about some Bruins today. Talk a little bit about the trade deadline coming up on Friday. Talk a little bit about the Bruins games that's happened in the last week or so. We are back and happy to do so. But before we do that, I got to give a big shout out. I had a friend of mine from dance class for my daughters hook me up with tickets to the Boston Bruins against the Islanders. I was given seats really, really low at TD Garden. Like I was row 3
Oh
at the
wow.
Garden. Ended up on TV on Nesson after the Bruins scored a goal and everything. I went with my daughter. It was an amazing experience. So shout out to Dad of Two Towing in New Hampshire for hooking us up. I know that Corey from over there, they're a regular listener and a supporter of the podcast. So really appreciate your support and hooking us up with those tickets. The speed of the game, though, I watch usually up from the 300 section because I do like to watch the plays develop and kind of appreciate it from there and pay a little less money for a seat in the TD
Yeah.
Garden, candidly. But when I got down there nice and low, man, the Garden is loud down there. And the game was late. The Bruins are pressing. They obviously didn't get it done in this game. We'll talk about it in a little bit. But that game was so much of a treat for us to watch down there. And we really appreciate your support, Corey, and appreciate the tickets for that game. And it was such a great time. So
The
now that
game is
that's out of the way, go
well, the
ahead.
game is a lot different depending where you're actually watching it. Like I'm
100%.
I'm like you 100%. I like watching it from up top to be able to see the plays develop and see the whole ice. I don't like having to lean forward if you sit right up against the glass where everybody that's not necessarily a hockey fan, you know, wants to sit close to the players and everything, but you really can't see everything that's going on when you sit like right against the glass. So it's definitely awesome to get that different perspective from time to time, especially when you don't have to pay for them as much, right?
Yeah,
That
exactly.
helps. That
Exactly.
helps.
I mean, it's nothing really like it really kind of gives you an appreciation for the athleticism of the individuals when you get down low and you're able to see just the size and the speed that they're
Mhm.
able to play at in real time. But like I said, when you're up top, you're able to see more of the X and O's, the tactical stuff that's going on. Not that I think that the Boston Bruins have really a whole lot cooking tactically right now, but
Tends to be some more shenanigans up top too that are always fun to watch.
the people watching is always a better time in the 300 section. That's for sure. For sure. So yeah, today's going to be a nice trade deadline episode preview. Um, really, I mean, what better to start with than the form that the team is in going into the trade deadline? And I don't know, Burge, what's one word you would use to describe the form that the Boston Bruins are in right now going into the deadline?
Oof.
I got one. I'll
Ye-
throw it at you. You ready?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Flaccid.
Appropriate with the episode number 2 there.
Nice.
Uh, I don't know if I
Yeah.
can top that one. I wasn't gonna go that route with it, but it's disappointing given the success that this team has had over the last decade or so. Right now, you're usually gearing up. They're already firmly in a playoff spot. You're getting ready to look to the real season of hockey, and it's quite a different tune right now. The state of the team is clearly feeling what they've done over the last few years, where they've kind of put all their chips on the table and gone in on top of a couple of free agent signings that maybe not panning out like we had all hoped. Like, I know for me with,
Yeah,
Last Home, I was all in on that. And obviously we're not really seeing the repayment on that just yet.
not yet.
But unwatchable.
That's your word, unwatchable?
Unwatchable. It's tough to watch it.
Flaccid, unwatchable. That's not 2 words you want to describe your season
No.
going into it. I can tell you that. All right, so let's dive into the recent results. We're not going to spend a lot of time here. We got a lot of other stuff we want to talk about. So first off, Bruins have a decent game against the Toronto Maple Leafs. They actually play the best first period I think that I've seen them play all season. Dominate the Leafs offensively. Shots were like 15 to like 6 or something like that. Just played a really, really good first period. They finished the first period, I think, up 2-0 or something along those
Yep.
lines. A great game for the Boston Bruins so far. And then a skilled Toronto Maple Leafs team claws back. And the Bruins just don't have the personnel right now that seem to be able to mitigate or stem the tide. And they're able to come back and beat the Bruins 5-4 in overtime after Lohrei makes, he's trying to make plays happen, which I'm okay with, right? I'm okay with Mason Lohrei trying to make plays happen because he's one of the few players on the Boston Bruins, especially in the blue line with Hampus Lindholm and Charlie McAvoy being out, that could make plays. So he's out there trying to make something happen. He makes a mistake. Suddenly, you've got Mitch Marner going the other way on a breakaway, and that's usually not a calculation you want to do. And there you go. The puck's in your net. The game's over.
And
But you get a point.
those types of mistakes are going to happen with younger players, and that's part of the whole state of the team where we've been saying for years, play the kids, and when you play the kids, these types of things happen. They're growing pains. It doesn't mean Mason Lohrei is a bad player. It's
right.
You just got to take the bad with the good when it comes with this. Unfortunately,
I mean, we're already on the heels of Don Sweeney publicly coming out and basically waving the white flag and saying, "Hey, I'm done. Like we're cooked. Like let's just do what's best to look toward the future." And that's obviously setting the table for what the Boston Bruins are going to be doing in, the trade deadline that's coming up here on Friday. So I am okay with Mason Lohrei going out and making that mistake and learning from it. That's what it's all about. I mean, historically speaking, the Bruins didn't put these kids in a position to make mistakes and learn from them. They would rather make one mistake and send them down to Providence and never see them again, and then trade them for a washed up veteran like David Backes or something like that. Like, that's not obviously we signed David Backes as a free agent. That's not a perfect example, but you get the type of player that I'm talking about.
You'd rather go out and get a past their prime veteran player to slot in with experience for a playoff run.
A Craig Smith.
Yeah, perfect example. At least go back a few years. Lee Stepniak. Like
Ryan Gianta.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. So that's why we're where we are now.
Yeah. So Bruins have a good effort that falls short. 5-4. That can happen. Whatever. You know what? They got a point. Great. They're in a wild card battle. Whatever. It's fine. That's a good team. What I really struggled with personally was that game against the New York Islanders. And even then, I thought they actually generated a lot of good looks. It was a lot of opportunities that I thought were maybe not placed the right place. A lot of shots to the chest of Ilya Sorokin. But I thought that they were moving the puck really well and they were working hard against the New York Islanders. Granted, the Islanders are not like a top tier team this year. And, they have their inherent problems too. But I thought that the Bruins probably deserved a better fate than a 2-1 loss in this game.
Yeah, I mean, you look at something, and this is going to be pretty much a common pattern over the games we're going to talk about here, is it's almost like the team is snake bitten. Obviously they pot 4 against the Maple Leafs. They outshoot the Maple Leafs, they lose. They outshoot the Islanders by a pretty significant margin in this game. And they can't solve Sorokin other than the one goal they got. So we'll talk about the next 2 games when we get there, but it's kind of a little bit of the same pattern, and there's a little bit of irony in there too.
Yeah. And I mean, we talk always about the kids. I mean, we were just talking about it. What do the Bruins do on the heels of Brad Marchand going down in the Pittsburgh game, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. They go out and they call up some kids. So Bruins end up. I just kind of alluded to it. Bruins play the Pittsburgh Penguins on a matinee-filled weekend. You had a 3:30 game back to back, one in Pittsburgh, one in Minnesota. That's a pretty heavy travel schedule for them. So I'll acknowledge that. I'll just put that out there in the ether. But the Bruins did a pretty good job. They put a gritty effort together to pull out a win against the Pittsburgh Penguins, who are another team that's struggling. But they still have, high tier, star power players on the Pittsburgh Penguins. You have to deal with the likes of Sidney Crosby, who still proved at the Four Nations tournament that he's still a absolute top tier elite level player. You have to deal with Evgeny Malkin, who's still trying to show that he's on a renaissance of his own.
Old friend Danton Heinen.
Good friend Danton Heinen. Yeah. Yeah. The Penguins are just led by Kyle Dubas, just trying to prove that they're still relevant. And the Bruins did a good job of stemming the tide and holding off the Penguins as they were trying to have a pretty tight resurgence there in the third period. And they got the win there by a score of 3-2. Any thoughts on the Penguins game, Birch?
Well, the irony of this is the one game last week that they got outshot and they found a way to win. They made more of their chances. They had less, but they made more of what they had in this one. And it's just it's one of those things. I remember, years back when these teams, when you're going into the playoffs or you're going down the stretch and you're needing some wins and you're peppering the opposing goalie and you just can't finish. Episode 69. Nice. But you get to that point where you're taking all these shots and you're snake bitten. You can't make that extra effort to get, to put the puck in the net. And ironically, in this Pittsburgh game, they didn't shoot as much and they ended up scoring enough. Helps when your defense steps up a little bit too, and your goaltending.
It helps to have David Pastrnak, I'll tell you that.
Oh, yes, you did. Well,
that guy is cooking still.
Yeah,
even though it dried up, that point streak, the point streak dried up against the Minnesota Wild. Pasta's just been on a tear. Probably one of the top 2 players in the entire league.
And we were killing him. We were killing him at the beginning of the year. They were killing him. He was like, "Where is this guy? He's nothing without Bergeron." That's what we heard. And it's the only untouchable on the team as far as I'm concerned when we get into our trade deadline talk. But he's the only one that I would not want to make any moves for because he's still got.
I think I've got a slightly longer list for that, but we'll chat about it in a little bit. Next up, Minnesota Wild, back-to-back, another matinee. I candidly, I will be right out here and I'll say I wasn't able to watch this game. I was at my daughter's tournament. She had a
How dare you?
So, but I was able to catch the highlights, and it looked like the Bruins just really had a hard time gaining any kind of offensive momentum. They couldn't get to the middle. Minnesota did a great job keeping them to the outside. And if you can neuter David Pastrnak, you neuter the Boston Bruins offense, because I think it was like something like the last 7 even strength goals came with David Pastrnak on the ice. If David Pasternak's not on the ice, the Bruins aren't scoring 5-on-5. That's just how it works. So that's an organizational problem.
That is a culture organizational problem. That is not. I wouldn't even go as far as say it's just a personnel problem. That's coaching problem. That's everywhere.
Let's go out. That's me tapping somebody on the shoulder and say, "Go out and make a fucking play." Like, what are you doing here? Like that. The only goal that scored in this game went off somebody's ass. Like, go get a dirty goal. Like, and I love Morgan Geekie. Friend of the show. But when you're spending more time looking at the refs with your hands up in the air instead of trying to like throw your body into the shooting lane, it's not a good look.
It's just frustration's coming out.
And honestly, I say it every time it happens to a Bruins player or a non-Bruins player. It's not like he broke your stick. He stick checked you and you dropped it. It'd be one thing
Yeah.
if you snapped your stick. I would be 100% with you. That's a slashing call. It's an instant call if you snap the stick. You weren't holding your stick hard enough.
Weak in the hands. That's what that comes down to. I can't stand when players complain about that, and I can't stand when it's called. And if he comes down,
Right
he
there with you.
chomps down, snaps the stick in half, and now he's got to go to the bench to get
Understood.
his stick. 100%.
Understood.
Even like when Chara used to go into the net, and he would like the stick lift, and the stick would just
Yeah,
flying.
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
dude, you should be holding on to your stick and not allow
Right.
that to happen. Like, that's not a penalty as far as I'm concerned.
Agreed.
And nobody should be
Agreed.
looking for a call with that. That's just a soft
No,
play.
I hate it. I hate it. I hate the petitioning for officiating. I hate the hands up like, come on, like where's the penalty? I can't stand that shit.
I hate fans that blame the refs all the time too.
Shut up. Just shut up. I know where this is going.
I couldn't resist it. It's been too long. I couldn't resist it.
I knew exactly what you were doing there. I'm not going to go down that road. Nope.
Take the bait.
Nope.
You almost had it. You almost had
Nope.
it.
Got to be quicker than that. Yeah. So the Boston Bruins get shut out 1-0 by the Minnesota Wild. I thought Gustafsson played a pretty good game for the Wild from the highlights that I was able to catch. I thought Jeremy Swayman played a pretty good game in this one as well, actually, despite falling. I mean, when you only give up one goal as a goaltender, especially at the NHL level, you have to expect to have a chance to get a win, and it just didn't happen.
No, yeah. I mean, it is. You give up a goal, you should win those games all the time. Like, if I'm being honest with you, like that's not a defensive thing. That's not a goaltending thing. It's the fact that nobody besides David Pastrnak can do anything right now for this team. That's what it
Yeah.
comes down to. And
Yeah.
you take him away, this is what happens.
It's true. Yep. So let's shift gears here a little bit. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the trade deadline. So it has come out and it has been said that, especially by Elliot Friedman, he said that the Boston Bruins are obviously looking at selling, but they're also looking at potentially adding.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just for this season. We're talking about adding players that the front office has identified as players that can contribute on a multi-year basis. So not just for this year, but next year and the following year. I want to get your take. Is there any specific areas that you think that the Boston Bruins need reinforcement at? Like center, wing, defense, goalie?
Definitely, you can always use centers. And obviously we kind of alluded to it a little earlier about how Elias Lindholm has worked out since he's been brought in. He's kind of underwhelmed, so to speak, for this Bruins team this year. And, the type, I'm not even necessarily looking at adding like, I don't want to say veteran players because that's not what I'm trying to say when what I'm about to say here is they need to add a piece. If they're going to add anything, they need to be pieces for this team that are going to be part of the next, I don't want to say generation, but like the next iteration of this Bruins team, like post Marchand. Like, what is this team going to look like? What is this team going to look like going forward? Like, I know I kind of said that Pasternak's my only untouchable guy, and that's probably not accurate given the fact that a guy like Charlie McAvoy, if they were to try to trade him right now, the value wouldn't be there because he's all banged up. So that's I guess what I'm trying to say is add any piece other than really a goalie. Because if they're not going to move on from Swayman, I think they have their guy. He's just got to obviously get his shit together and figure out, where he kind of went wrong earlier this year. But like youth and any position really, center would be atop my list. I wouldn't be devastated if they moved on from a guy like a Brandon Carlo and brought in somebody else like a younger defenseman to fit into this core going forward. But I just big overall picture, I want a major shakeup. I'm sick and tired of seeing the same thing every year. If that makes sense.
So we'll go over a specific name, some specific names a little bit later on, but it seems like the overall kind of take from you is that, we need center depth at this
Mhm.
point. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. Um Regarding the salary cap, I'm not tremendously concerned for the Boston Bruins because it's already come out multiple times that there's going to be pretty significant increases in the salary cap. I think it's something like 9 million or something in the next year or so. That's a giant increase. Like that is a top tier player you can just add to your roster
Long
with an
overdue
additional
for
salary cap.
that too, with the whole COVID everything that went down. So long overdue for that.
Yeah, I mean, you just look at the average salary in the NHL compared to other professional sports, and the NHL needs a nice little bump, but the NHL
Yeah.
needs to start making more money, and then
Hmm.
they can pay their players more money. So, um, I think I agree with you. I do want, you know, a center. They need a young center with top six potential.
Hmm.
I think that they need a healthy injection of skill in the top six, even on the winger side. So I wouldn't be opposed to going out and seeing if there's any wingers out there that would be, the right fit. I wouldn't even be opposed to going out and getting Rantanen if you are confident that you can extend him. Or maybe you just wait till free agency and sign him in free agency. The Boston Bruins need somebody not named David Pastrnak in their top six. I don't care if it's a center or a winger
Hmm.
that can put the goddamn puck in the net.
100% agree with that. They miss having guys like David Krejci and Patrice Bergeron in there, and being able to just add a winger each year, whether it's again I'm going back years, but adding whether it's Nathan Horton or Jerome McGinley or somebody like that, adding one
Yeah.
piece to fix that. They need like four pieces in that top six to really fix it.
Yeah, 100% agree. So I'm gonna throw some names at you, and I'll get your take, and then I'll provide mine afterwards. And they're gonna be current Boston Bruins players, and I want to get your thoughts on A, should they trade them? B, what do you think the package in return should be if they do?
Okay.
All right. Name number one, Trent Frederick.
Oh, definitely trade him. I mean, he's a guy that I feel like the type of player that it really is a dime a dozen in the NHL, where you can find another one, whether it be in the middle rounds of a draft or in the depth signings of free agency to kind of fit him in. In terms of a package for him, it's going to be a common theme with where I sit on these types of packages for these players that we're going to go over here. But I want the draft picks. We've spent a better part of it, at least half a decade now since 2020, even though going back further, just constantly moving the draft picks out of here to try to bolster the current edition of the team. And those at the time were the correct moves to make. But I think we're at the point now where you get a middle high round pick, second. I'm not Trent Frederick. I don't know if I go as high as a second, but like you get at least a third, like something like that for him. I'm happy. Like I want. They need to rebuild this farm system for the Bruins. They've spent so much time. I don't want to say neglecting it because it hasn't been a neglect. It's been done by design, but they need to start adding these types of players that they can develop into the system again now. This is the time to do it.
Yeah. Frederick, we've already talked about a million times on the pod. I feel like now Frederick is gone. He's been gone all year. Former first round pick, never really panned out to who the Boston Bruins kind of projected him to be. He's been a St. Louis boy through and through. He talks about St. Louis this, St. Louis that. My parents are in St. Louis. They have a St. Louis company. St. Louis, St. Louis, St. Louis, St. Louis, St. Louis. The guy wants to be a Blue, right?
Go with
And he's
Jimmy.
gonna go to be a Blue. So see if Doug Armstrong wants to overpay to make Trent Frederick a Blue. Like, guess what? We spent a first on him. You want to give us a first? Do it. You can have him tomorrow. You're not going to pay us a first. You're not going to pay the Boston Bruins a first for Trent Frederick. Trent Frederick will go to a contending team that's trying to pull in some sort of tough forward vibe for like a second round pick. I do believe the Bruins will get a second round pick for Trent Frederick. I do believe that teams like Edmonton and any Western Conference like Colorado that have just seen highlights of him beating the piss out of people will think he's more valuable than what he is. I've seen a lot of people on hockey Twitter that are like, oh my God, Trent Frederick would bring an edge to the team. They must not watch Trent Frederick as much as I do. Like 99% of the time, Trent Frederick is like a teddy bear out there, and he thinks he's like a skilled player that's not skilled enough to actually like do anything out there. So I'm not a Freddie guy. I never have been a Freddie guy. And to get a second round pick to cut ties with a guy that's probably going to walk to the St. Louis Blues for nothing, that's a win-win for me as far as I'm concerned. So trade Trent Frederick and trade him now as far as I'm concerned.
Sign me up.
Next up, next name, Bursch, Justin Brazeau.
I go back and forth on what I want them to do with Brazeau. I like his game. If a team comes to the Bruins and wants to give, the right price tag, again, I'm talking draft picks for this type of trade, then I'm pulling the trigger on it. I like his game. I think he's a fit here in Boston. I think his, the upside on him is obviously kind of capped. He's, 27 years old. He's not a young player. He doesn't have a lot of NHL experience, but I think he fits into what the type of hockey that the Boston Bruins play. So I believe he's a free agent at the end of the year. Am I right on that?
That's correct.
Okay. So, when you're making a move with him, I hope Don Sweeney in the front office has had discussions with him in terms of what an extension might look like if they want to bring him back to kind of be in that bottom six role.
So,
but
on that note, Emily Kaplan from ESPN did report that the initial discussions were had and that both the team and the player are far apart in expectations.
I missed that. So take what you can get for him before he walks. That's my attitude. If you're far apart now, I have a hard time really seeing them meet come the offseason. So in that sense, I think he'll bring that, a good level to a contending team that may be interested in him. I would hate to see them, and that goes for anybody that we're going to talk about. I'd hate for them to hold on to him and have him walk for nothing.
Louis Eriksson.
Exactly. That's the first name that comes to mind is Louis Eriksson. I don't want to see another one of those types of scenarios. Obviously, Louis Eriksson would have garnered a much larger return than Justin Brazeau will garner Friday. But anytime a player, you let it go at the trade deadline and you keep the player in hopes that you're going to re-sign him and then he walks, that's just bad asset management in my eyes. And I think that's probably the worst thing a general manager in the front office can do. Unless this week they magically make some process and they get, within a ballpark of each other and they think that there's a really good chance that they're going to get it done. Otherwise, they should be shopping this guy out of here tomorrow.
On Friday, you get 3 first-round picks and Mikko Rantanen. Perfect.
Sign me up.
Well done. So before we keep going, and I'll give my take of Justin Brazeau, let's go ahead and send it over to our sponsors for this episode. This season, the Two Pat Stack podcast is proudly supported by 2 fantastic local businesses. First, we're going to give a shout out to Earth Eagle Brewings, where great beer meets great company. With locations in both Portsmouth and Somersworth, New Hampshire, Earth Eagle is something for everybody. Whether you're relaxing in their Portsmouth beer garden or enjoying live music and trivia at the Somersworth pub, you'll be in good hands with their craft beers, epic hot dogs, and much more. And don't forget, if you're into brewing your own beer, their homebrew shop has you covered in Somersworth. And when it comes to tattooing, there's no better place than Vital Ink Tattoo in Barrington, New Hampshire. The artists at Vital Ink are all about turning your ideas into tattoos you'll love forever. The team works hard to make sure every visit is comfortable, and their dedication to making your tattoo experience fun and relaxing is unmatched. Whether you're getting your first piece or adding to your collection, Vital Ink is the place to go. Special thanks to both of these sponsors for supporting the Two Pat Stack podcast this season. Be sure to check them out and show them some love. All right, I am back. Justin Brazeau, I'm 100% in agreement. Like, if this guy honestly thinks he's worth more than maybe like 1.5 mil max. Like, good luck. Like, I hope you get dealt for like a 4th round pick and
Yeah.
you can
4th
go
rounder.
and make like a good run. And like, honestly, I like, honestly, nothing personal. I really do hope you have success because it's been fun watching you in Boston. I think you bring a very unique skill set, Justin Brezzo, to a team. You're like a larger, less mobile Chris Kreider with your hands in front of the net. So I do think the Boston Bruins would be best served by moving on, opening up that roster spot for a player currently in Providence, like a Georgi Merkulov, who's playing right now with the team, like a Fabian Lysell, these players that really deserve an opportunity up that have kind of gotten clogged up by this journeyman who proved that he could play at the NHL level. So, yeah, I would be fine with moving on for some, a little bit of draft capital and filling up development camp with less invites and more actual Bruins property. So, next name, hurts me to say it, friend of the show, Morgan Geekie. Pending RFA, by the way.
Yeah, pending RFA. So you have team control with Geekie. He's a guy that I want to see kept. He's progressively gotten better since he joined the team. He's had his best years of his young career with the team. It's, have they reported any numbers on him? Because I haven't seen it, but have they said anything about where do they think he's gonna line up in terms of a salary?
Good question. No, but it has been reported that the Bruins exchanged numbers before the season, but there hasn't been a lot of communication since.
That's not always necessarily indicative of anything, the fact that they're not talking
agree.
right now, especially considering the team control. So, any team that comes in and wants to sign Morgan Geekie in the offseason is going to have to pay the Bruins draft capital for that. With that being said, like Morgan Geekie is the type of player where I would hold on to until the writing's completely on the wall that he wants more than the Bruins are willing to offer, and he goes out. Like, do I want to rely on Morgan Geekie as a top 6 player and pay him as such? No, I'm not there yet. But in terms, even a middle 6 is probably a bit low of a description of where I see him. But like, he is a good second line player right now, and obviously here on the Two Pad Stack, we are a little biased because he is the friend of the show. But putting that bias aside, I still believe that he is a player that, given his age, given the status of his free agency, is an asset to this team right now. That is there to trade him right now, I think would be a disservice.
I agree. I 100% agree. And
we're going to stop agreeing.
It's not just because he joined the show and had a good time with me. We talked about a few different things like tattoos too, but I mean, honestly, it's no disagreement that he didn't have the start to the season that he wanted. It was a really rough season for Morgan Geekie to start the season, but since then he turned it on. He's already eclipsed his career high in goals. And maybe a lot of that is because he's playing on the heels of David Pastrnak right next to him, and Pasta's going on a heater. But the chemistry's there between him, Zacha, and David Pastrnak. And you have him locked as an RFA. You can tender a qualifying offer, and you can say, hey, here's your qualifying offer. If you don't take it, you don't get to play in the NHL this year. If you want to go to arbitration, whatever, but you're going to play for the Boston Bruins regardless.
Mm-hmm.
That's a powerful thing. And I do think that based upon Morgan Geekie's statements that he's come out and said, he says he loves being a Bruin. He wants to be a Bruin. And I think at that point, if he loves being a Bruin and wants to be a Bruin, he's an RFA, you make it happen.
Ride it
because
out. If you ride it out. And then
he's on pace for a 20-goal season at this point, easily.
He's got 19 right now. So, he easily is going to hit 20.
20, 25 at this point. Continues on a heater. He could hit 30, maybe. I don't know. Like, I saw him score a hat trick myself against the Vegas Golden Knights last year. It's possible. So, I don't know. I'm agreeing, but he's a player that could maybe fetch more on the deadline because of his age and because of his scoring ability. So, who knows? We'll wrap up on Geekie here. Let's move on. So the next couple of names, they're going to have a little bit more term, which is interesting. It's not just a traditional sell-off for the Boston Bruins, is what I would say this deadline is. It's a little bit different. We're talking about, not just pending UFAs, not just pending RFAs, but also players under term. So the first name I'm going to throw at you is the wonderful local kid, Charlie Coyle.
I'm okay moving on. I mean, he's the type of player. He's aging a little bit. He's getting up there. Um, I wouldn't say he's overpaid, but when we signed the contract, I thought he was overpaid when they gave
He's
it to
at
him.
what, like 5.4 or something like
Five,
that?
I think 5.25, so 5.25.
Yep.
I think when they signed him to that contract, they envisioned that he was going to basically just replace David Krejci. So David Krejci goes out, Coyle's now in that role, and he's performing at a level comparable to that. And they're just not the same type of player, him and Krejci. So again, you get an offer. There is, some protections in terms of him having a say as to where he ends up should they make a trade. So that will make a trade a little bit more difficult to pull off. Obviously, being a local kid here, I'm sure he does not want to go anywhere. I'm sure he wants to stay here for the duration of his contract. But if you get a team that is, not on his no trade list, that they can find and get a suitable return for Charlie Coyle, I don't know what that is. The term obviously plays a part in it. If the salary cap's going up, a 5.25 salary for a center is pretty good. Put it this way: if they keep him, I won't be upset. If they deal him, I won't be upset. It's an all-time hedge move by me right there. I know, but like,
I disagree. I'm just kidding.
you're gonna disagree with the hedge? Okay, which way you going with it? You're gonna say they're gonna cut him? Go ahead.
I think it's time to move on from Charlie Coyle.
It probably is. It probably is.
The Bruins need a transition right now, and the position of center is a position of weakness right now for this team. And with the term that Charlie Coyle has, how long are we going to wait for Charlie Coyle to become a dominant top six center? He's not. If he's
No,
not it yet,
no,
he's not going to
he's
do it.
not. No,
He's not going to do it. And I don't think that $5-something million, even with the cap that we're going to have next year, is the appropriate cap hit for a third line center. They
he's
paid
33
him.
years old.
They paid him projecting, like you had said, projecting him to take over that 2C role. And every time he's played beyond the 3C role, he's looked out of his element. And he's looked like he's playing against competition he can't play against. He's
not that type of player.
The offense dries up and he just doesn't have it there. He's an okay shutdown center, but you don't want to pay a shutdown center $5-something million a year. So good player, good for a contending team. I could see a team calling up the Boston Bruins and saying, hey, if you want to retain 50% on Charlie Coyle in the next couple of seasons, we'll give you like a second round pick and a decent end prospect. And that's a package that I would say I would sit there if I was Don Sweeney. I would say that's compelling. I got to take a long, hard think about this because, we can convert. I mean, granted, it's a shallower draft, but, a second round pick is better than the vast majority of the rest of our prospects right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm open to it. And I think now's the time to trade him if you're actually going to trade him.
Yeah, because he's got next year as term. So he's got next year under contract. And
yeah, it's not a pure rental either. So
especially, and you're going to give the team Charlie Coyle at what, 2.75 mil, 2.75 mil for 2 years. That's a pretty appealing thing. I mean, maybe you're not going to, retain 50%, but let's say they retain 30% or something like that. You get it at a respectable 30. Now.
Yeah.
And if I find out the Bruins turn that down and like Charlie Coyle was willing to go and you had this, the movement clauses and everything, the no trade clauses all lined up, and they said no, I'd probably take my hedge and I go a little bit toward they should have traded him. I would go more towards your ballpark with that. The 33-year-old center for a team right now that's in transition does the Bruins no good. So
yeah. Next name, Brandon Carlo.
I'd explore. I'd explore and see what the market is for him.
I think you could get a first for the guy.
You probably could, and I would be very happy with that. I mean, Brandon Carlo is a fantastic defenseman. As obviously his offensive output is, we'll say, non-existent, really.
Yeah.
But again, going back to what I said when we started this discussion, I am not really taking many of these guys off the table, off the books. If a team comes to me, they want Brandon Carlo, and they're going to give me a good return for him, you absolutely entertain that, and you 9 times out of 10 do it, because the Bruins need a complete reset. You have your core, we'll call it 3 players right now on this team. Everybody else around it, you can plug and play to kind of build around those players. And they're long overdue for a reset like this. It's been a decade since the team had to completely almost reset itself. And out of that reset, you ended up getting guys because they made picks and they made trades and everything like that. You ended up getting guys like Charlie McAvoy, David Pasternak,
Brandon Carlo.
Brandon Carlo was part of that. Jeremy Swayman was part of that period of time, I believe. So like you get all of these assets, and that gives you just so many more darts to throw at the board to hopefully you hit on somebody and get one of those more, top end guys. They tried to, but I'm gonna say this: I'm hesitant to give the general manager another stab at it, because we know how it looked the first time at the very beginning when they whiffed on those 3 picks, or 2 of the 3 picks in the first round of the 2015 draft. I don't want to bring that up again and go down that road, but I get to that point with Don Sweeney. I'm like, yeah, I'm a little scared about.
I give him one more offseason. That's my perspective. And I put out in a video today saying that I give Don Sweeney one more offseason, because the initiative of the offseason has changed now. The offseason is about looking toward the future now. It's not about winning now. So you have this trade deadline and this offseason to do what you can to change. It's a pit stop as far as I'm concerned. The car has come in, it's parked, change out what parts you need to change out the, everything about the car that needs to make it better for next year, because the second half of the race is coming. First half of the race we've already lost. Now it's time to look for the second half of the race. So I give Don Sweeney this offseason, and I see how they do next season. If they're at the trade deadline and they're in a pickle next offseason too, he's gone. Cam Neely, Don Sweeney, they're all gone as far as I'm concerned.
So every draft pick that I'm asking for right now in these return for these players, I want it to be for the 2026 draft, not the 2025 draft. I'm very scared about letting Don Sweeney near that draft board, just because of the whiffs that he's had. And I'll say it, I'm still scarred by what happened 10 years ago. I'm still scarred by
that. That's a decade ago, though.
I'm still scarred by it. I don't trust him.
I still have a hard time holding that against him, because he was a brand new GM and he was trying to move up. He didn't want to make those picks.
No, I understand that.
Pulled out, so.
But he did make those picks, and that shows. And yes, he was a new GM at the time, and Don Sweeney has proven himself, as I would say, in the upper echelon of the GMs in the league. Like you talked about in the in your video and all that. That's why he's the GM of Team Canada and all this stuff. But the draft picks that he's made, there have been some questionable ones that he has made even recently. If I had to say, all right, let's have Don Sweeney just negotiate all the contracts and the the re-signing of the players and this and that, but let's let somebody else draft. Sign me up, because Don Sweeney has a way of getting these players to sign team-friendly contracts. How he does it, I don't know. He did it with the initial Pasternak deal back in the day. Yeah, maybe it's something like that. I mean, I'm sure you're into that, so I mean that may work. But like,
what can I say?
Nice,
nice.
But yeah, that's the thing. Like, your analogy on the pit stop is accurate. I personally believe this is more than a one-off season retool. They're not going to like bottom out like Chicago did, because they have too much talent to get to like that point. But like, I think there is more to this retool than can be fixed in one off season, just given the state of their farm system and all that. That's why I get pause on Don Sweeney, where I'm like, if they fired him, I'd be okay.
I get it. I'd be fine if they fired him. I mean, as it is, we're gonna have a big coaching search this offseason as it is. So, all right. Next name. Are you ready for this one?
I think so.
The captain, Brad Marchand.
Trade him.
Oh shit, he's coming right out. Trade him.
Trade him.
Why?
He's 36.
37.
Whatever, 37. Sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, you're gonna strengthen my argument. Like, I understand, like
Oh no, you're right. He is 36. Yeah.
Okay.
He will be 37 in
next year.
in May.
Okay. There is an argument to be made that he has earned the type of treatment Bergeron got at the end, where it's like, okay, you can go year to year till you decide you're done, and you're not, or you show that you can't do it, because he's played his entire career here. But I'm going to put the future of the organization above any kind of sentimental type value, because the team, when Bergeron went through it and Krejci went through it, the team was better. The team, they were able to do that, and they're just not there right now. They're just not. They need assets, and Marchand, if they have a suitor for him and he's willing to go, I don't think they do him dirty and send him somewhere he doesn't necessarily want to go. I mean, I know he's got the same kind of modified no trade clause that's out there where he submits his list, but I think they really have to explore trying to get something for him before the value is gone. And I think if they were able to do something like that, it would definitely send a message throughout the organization that we are rebuilding. We are rebuilding now. We are closing that era off, and it is time to usher in the new era without anybody that remained from the last cup appearance team, or the last cup winning team, the last generation. This for me, it's once he's out, you have really turned the page, and now you are completely onto a new generation. And he's not one player. I mean, talking about the sentimental side of things, he's not a player like I'm sentimental about, where I would be like heartbroken if they traded him. Obviously not. I'm sitting out here basically calling for the team to trade him. If it was Bergeron, I would have a completely different tune. I don't know why. I mean, Bergeron, played for the Bruins when I was a freaking in middle school, for God's sake. So there was a little bit more of a sentimental attachment there to a guy like Bergeron. Whereas Marchand is, I don't know. I guess I don't know how to describe it, but like, I want the team to improve going forward, and I think he's a great piece to be able to get serious return for a player like him. For a true contending team.
What does a return look like for Brad Marchand?
I think you usually get a first for him, if not more. I know he's 36. He's not under contract next year. But if you're talking about a team that is looking for that type of player with that still can play, has seasoned playoff experience, and plays with an edge, I feel like a player like him would be desired by any contending team that could fit him onto their roster going into the playoffs this year.
So what about the comparable that I like to use, and it's going out in an article tomorrow that I posted to Fans First? The Claude Giroux deal.
Yeah.
Owen Tippett, first round pick. That's top 10 protected, by the way, and a third round pick for Giroux at 50% salary retained. A couple of tweener players and a fifth round pick going the other way with Brad Marchand.
Smash that trade. That's an easy trade to make.
Now, let me ask you the following question. Do you see Brad Marchand returning to the Boston Bruins in free agency if he doesn't extend with the team that acquires him?
I feel like that is entirely possible. Entirely possible, because Marchand's not chasing money at this point. He may want to go to a team that is closer to contending for a cup, especially if he doesn't get one, if he's dealt somewhere and that team doesn't win the cup. I could see him chasing another one. I could also see him not caring about that, where he, Brad, do us a solid here. Go play 3 months with another team, and then we'll re-sign you back in the off season or something like that. Having kind of that backdoor type, deal in the back of his mind where, hey, we'll be able to bring you back. This is the number we're thinking. They've already talked about what it looks like after this year for him in terms of salary. It's probably going to be the, year by year type situation, just like Bergeron had at the end, where, you get to the end and you determine, hey, this is it. It's entirely possible. It's entirely possible for him to return, play another season, and go out with the Bruins.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I don't believe the team should do him dirty and send him somewhere he doesn't want to go. If he doesn't want to go, let him play out this year. And, there is something to be said about legacies for a guy that's been such a major part of your organization. I value the fact that they have done so much to go all in for the last 8 years, that they need to maximize every asset that they have, and maximizing Brad Marchand, the asset, is trading him by Friday.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it all depends on how you want to handle the person versus asset conversation, right? If Brad Marchand understands that there's no chance I can win a cup with Boston, and the best way I can be a good soldier for Boston is to accept the trade and go to another team and, you know, bring assets into Boston and then maybe come back and be a Bruin again, like, that's great. I don't think that's also realistic. I think if the Bruins trade Brad Marchand at the deadline, that's his last game as a Boston Bruin. It is very, very rare. I can't tell you the last time that somebody was dealt away as a veteran from a team and they returned to sign a full season contract in the immediate offseason. I think that if the Bruins do indeed decide to trade Brad Marchand, which is a feasibility, it is possible based upon all the reports I'm reading, with the fact that Brad Marchand and the Boston Bruins front office have yet to come to any sort of close semblance to a deal on an extension. I think if they end up trading Brad Marchand, he's going to be played. He's played his last game as a Boston Bruin.
And that'll definitely be a emotional moment if they do trade him. Like that's going to be a historic moment for the Bruins franchise if they end up doing that. It is the right move. I think it is the right move for the future of the team. And I mean, like, hell, last year we were talking about this, and like in the offseason we were talking about this, and it was like, if an offer presents itself, you have to seriously consider it. Like, there's few players in the NHL that are like, I would say, untradeable from the people perspective, whereas like you never see them dealt. Like Sidney Crosby's a guy that will never play another game for another team.
I don't know. Knowing Kyle Dubas, he might fuck that up too.
I'd be very stunned if that happened. I mean, Brad Marchand, Bruin his entire career. Look at Ray Bourque. Ray Bourque left to go win another cup. I mean, granted that the situations were a little different where Bourque was chasing a cup, but Bourque played 20-something years for the Bruins and they got traded. So, like, it's not out of the realm of possibility that something like this could happen. Not many players play their entire career with one team anymore. It's not a pretty, Bergeron's an exception. Krejci's an exception to the rule. Most players play for more than one NHL franchise, and
some play for 8.
Exactly. Some people bounce around and play for a different team every year. So, like, if they're going to maximize the asset and they're really going to commit to a retool, then all of this needs to be 100% on the forefront of Don Sweeney's desk going into Friday.
Yep, I agree. Moving on. We're having a trade deadline special on Friday. Tune in on YouTube, on Twitter. We're going to be live breaking down the trades as they happen, talking about some of these deals. Maybe you're going to get some of the trades that we've talked about in today's episode, and you're going to hear some of my candid responses to it. So tune in on Twitter, on YouTube. We're going to be breaking that stuff down. And I think that's going to be good for our episode here, episode 69. It's been what? What?
Can we touch on the trade that went down in the NHL? What was it? 2 days ago?
Go ahead.
The Seth Jones trade
Yeah.
to Florida?
Yeah.
Holy hell did Chicago fleece Florida in that trade?
Think so, huh?
Oh, I think 100%. I think 100%. I mean, I see why Florida made the deal. I think it was Seth Jones, what was it? 20% retained, which ended up bringing it down to like roughly $7 million a year. They retained that amount of money for 5 seasons,
5 years. Yeah.
for 5 years, which again, we've talked about the salary cap going up. I think it works out to like 2.5 million or something like that for them to retain. That's pennies on the dollar. Get what the salary cap's going to look like. Chicago is still a ways away, but they get a quality young goaltender in Spencer Knight and a first round pick from Florida. Whether it's going to be this year or next year remains to be seen. We'll find out more probably by Friday, because if the Florida Panthers don't have their 2026 first round pick, it becomes the 2027 first round pick, and I don't believe there's any protections on it. So Seth Jones slots in to the Florida Panthers. You know, another option for their top 4. They're stacked on the back end down there. But I just think that Chicago is they're building their team right now. And they are obviously have been in the dumpster for a while since, Taves and Kane all left and they kind of went. But they are really setting themselves up to be an elite team in this league again in a few years. And I honestly thought Seth Jones was an untradeable asset or a negative asset given his contract. And they got a first round pick and a quality young goaltender who I think had better numbers than Bobrovsky down in Florida going into the trade. I'm not 100% sure on that. They were very close if they didn't. To me, it was just like, wow, they're giving up on It seems like they're giving up on Spencer Knight a little early.
I mean, you got to go with the goalie that you already have signed to $10 million. Right?
Well, sure. Sure.
And then Knight already had step away for, the player assistance program. So
I still think Chicago is going to come out of that, and when all
the
is said and done,
the advanced stats for Seth Jones still said that he was playing at a high level. He's just stuck on a really shitty Chicago team. So I'm going to disagree with you. I think this is a good deal for the Florida Panthers. I think that the Florida Panthers are able to attract talent from teams that are just stuck at the bottom of the barrel and are not able to actually compete anymore. And they got a pretty good deal here on Seth Jones.
I don't think it's going to age well. If they don't get another cup in their window with after this trade, and Spencer Knight ends up turning into an elite goaltender in this league,
I don't think he will.
Well, I'm just saying, if he does, look out. That's that. I just don't. I put it this way. I think Florida. Their cup chances for me before this trade and after this trade, it didn't really move the needle much in terms of where I view the Florida Panthers. Like, did it bump them up a little bit? Sure, but like it's not like this mind blowing addition to an already stacked roster.
Now they're able to tuck away Matt Tkachuk on LTIR until after the season ends, and then debut him on, the Vegas Golden Knights schedule of Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final. Yeah, exactly. LTI Lightning.
But hey, if it works out for them and they get another cup, then I will agree with you where I think it's a good trade for both parties. But just given where Seth Jones's contract was, I don't feel like they needed to pay as much as they did to acquire him.
Yeah.
I think they overpaid. Or should have at least got more retention out of it.
If you identify that area of your roster as a big enough need, I don't think it was too much of a price to pay, especially with what you're going to see prices going for at the deadline itself, I'm sure.
We'll see. But like I said, I think Spencer Knight's a very good goalie, and I think that it just seemed like they gave up on him too soon in this trade, almost like a throw-in. It seemed like that because of
you could say that about the Linus Ullmark deal too. They had 2 really good goalies, and they had to move on from one, and I think that they made the right choice on the one to keep.
That's a discussion for another day.
Yeah, it is. That's going to do it for episode 69 of the Two Pad Stack podcast. This has been a nice episode to bring to you guys. Bursch, thanks for joining, buddy. Hope you had a good time. Glad to have you back in the seat, bud.
Hell yeah. Looking forward to the next one.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, we appreciate you. I hope you had a good time listening to us bicker about bullshit. And we will catch you next week, same time, same place. Tune in on Friday for our live show for the trade deadline, breaking down the trades as they happened. And until then, we will talk to you next time. Peace.
Peace.